Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of State of Cybercrime. My name is Matt Radulak, and I'm joined by my co-host.
I am David Gibson.
And we are
Happy Friday.
happy Friday. We're so excited to chat with you guys today. As always, we like to kick off the show with the icebreaker. David, where are you joining the show from today?
I am in Connecticut, Earth.
And are you an AI, or are you is it actually you that's here with us today?
How would I even know?
That's probably not something that a bot would say. Feel free to let us know where you're joining us from today. I am in beautiful, sunny London, England. This show is made possible by you, our audience. We have a jam-packed agenda today, so we're going to definitely talk about ShinyHunters at the end of the episode, but we're going to run through a bunch of our usual segments first. Those of you joining us for the first time, we always like to start the show with some good news. As oftentimes in cybersecurity, it's all doom and gloom, it's all bad, it's all the eventual demise to our robot overlords, but there is often a lot of good things to say, and we have a couple of good things to share with you today. First and foremost, Black Suit, along with affiliated ransomware groups like Royal and Quantum and Chaos, they've been linked to over 450 attacks targeting critical sectors like healthcare, education, government, and energy, and combined have extorted over $370 million in ransomware payments based on the current valuation of cryptocurrency. And what happened is that the US Department of Justice, following a takedown of Black Suit's dark web portal and an operation that they carried out called Checkmate, confiscated over $1 million in cryptocurrency from the Black Suit ransomware gang back in January of last year. And this was due to the extensive tracking of the funds across multiple exchange accounts. Those seized assets were part of ransomware payments that were made dating all the way back to April 2023, totaling about 50 Bitcoin, which at the time was worth about $1.5 million, that was paid by victims in exchange for the decryptor.
Dr. Evil, $1 million. Why are we leading with this?
I think the point is, and we've had a lot of stories about this, that, we have a seizure by the government, but also that like tracking crypto is possible. And we start to see more forensics accounting firms, especially from South America, have success at identifying and tracing cryptocurrency through the dark web and even public exchanges and even, mixers and other crypto laundering services.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting that they're going to be able to spot this a little bit more easily. I also think at least they got the infrastructure that was used for this, so hopefully it'll slow them down a little bit too, right?
100%.
Yeah. What else we got?
Well, you tell me what's going on what else is going on with the Department of Justice?
Yeah, so the four folks from Ghana, or Ghanaian nationals, were charged and extradited, and they're now looking at potentially decades of jail time for their role in, and these were the chairmen of this major fraud ring that scammed both individuals as well as companies. With individuals, a lot of romance scams. With companies, it was phishing to make the emails look like customers or employees. And in both cases, the fraudsters would trick their victims into depositing money into the accounts of U.S. middlemen, and then on their way to Ghana. So a lot of people and companies lost a whole lot of money. So it's good we're getting those folks off the net.
100%. Now, we can also talk a little bit about Darkbit. Darkbit was known for a lot of ransomware attacks back in 2023 that targeted VMware ESXi hosts, and also for participating in the anti-Israel attacks back when there was the cracking of its encryption. Israel's National Cyber Command had ultimately linked Darkbit to an Iranian state-sponsored group called Muddy Water, which was known for its cyber espionage activities. Now, the reason that this is a newsworthy story is a company called Profero exploited weaknesses in Darkbit's encryption, mainly based on low entropy in the way that they generate their keys, but also predictable file headers and the ways that VMDK files are set up, ultimately allowing them the ability to brute force decryption keys. So what essentially, while a lot of VMDK files were encrypted, Profero was allowed to recover significant amount of data without full decryption by expressly navigating file systems, extracting unencrypted content, and basically brute forcing and guessing the decryption keys. Now, they're not releasing their decryptor to the public, but they do offer assistance to victims that reach out directly.
Yeah, this is interesting. A lot of the VMDK files have the common headers, so that made the decryption easier. Also, apparently, they have a ton of empty space as well. And the dark bit used partial encryption, so they'd only like encrypt little bits of the file. So between those bits, there was a lot of usable stuff in the VMDK files that they were able to recover without any encryption or decryption at all.
Now, in our next segment, AI Vey, our newest segment, will certainly leave you saying AI Vey to the eventual demise to our robot overlords. Now, what's going on with this man in the middle prompt attack?
Yeah, the man in the prompt or the monkey in the prompt. But the this is another story, I guess, about hidden injection methods. We have to be really aware of like what's going into the prompt. And somebody figured out how to create a malicious browser extension that you could then use to inject into the prompt instructions, read data, modify the prompts, exfiltrate stuff. The way that this works is through DOM, the document object model, which is an API that the web browsers use to render the documents. Basically, the prompt is a field that you can then access with like JavaScript or something. So now you can interact with that field through this browser extension, which doesn't require a lot of privileges. This is a theoretical, it's kind of a research attack. We haven't seen this out in the wild, to my knowledge, but this is something we got to be beware of, is the browser extensions and how they can now interact with the browser-based LLMs like a Claude or a ChatGPT.
And there are a lot of vectors when it comes to exploiting AI. One that I want to talk about, essentially through Gemini, there was an exploit via a calendar invite. So security researchers demonstrated how attackers could hijack Gemini by sending malicious calendar invites where the embedded prompts Gemini would interpret and then act upon. Ultimately, this allowed attackers to control some smart home devices, turning off lights, opening shutters, and manipulating Gemini's integration with Google services. Now, this is a prompt injection technique where hidden instructions were embedded in calendar event descriptions. And the way that Gemini processed these as legitimate commands, and they would then, leverage the integrations to Google Workspace. I think this is really, really interesting because we have a cross between a prompt injection attack and something in the physical domain. Now, obviously, a lot of this has to do with like the whole way that the Google universe is set up and Google Home and how deeply integrated Gemini is into that experience. But it underscores the need for input validation and sandboxing in AI systems, especially if they're connected to some type of physical infrastructure. Now, I thought about like, what's the worst that could have happened here? Well, I mean, let's say that like you had some, at-risk health people in the home and you just turned the heat up to 100 degrees or something like that, and you're kind of battling that. I mean, I kind of tried to say like, what's the worst case scenario with the way this exploit was designed?
Okay, Google, let's drive off a cliff.
Yeah, I guess if the
You know,
car can be controlled by Gemini.
well,
And
it's coming, right? With so much being controlled. I mean, we're on the verge of this. It's kind of an interesting combination.
yeah,
Door locks,
audio
great
services,
point.
door locks. Yeah, good
Yeah,
point, Michael. Yeah.
yeah,
And Google's acknowledged the issue, and they said that they're working on mitigation strategies to prevent prompt injection in the future. Now,
good
what's
thing.
going on with GPT-5?
Well, so I don't know if folks have tried GPT-5 out in the wild here. Feel free to chat in. I have definitely noticed it's making some more mistakes than I thought 4.0 did. But I'm not the only one. Apparently, some red teams have figured out that GPT-5 is pretty susceptible to a lot of the manipulation techniques that we've been hearing about over the past, few months or maybe a year now. But this red team was able to jailbreak it in a day using techniques like the storytelling, where they're kind of doing a long form, low and slow kind of attack, getting the prompt around, string joining, like using hyphens between words, right? So a bunch of different techniques. And they've even come out and said, we're not sure that this is enterprise ready, guys. So that's kind of a big thing, I think, to come out and say. But careful with your models.
Yeah, and careful with your prompts too, apparently.
Yes.
Now, let's talk about a few vulnerabilities and what they mean to the security community. First, I just want to shout out Varonis Threat Labs and the security research team, specifically the two researchers that uncovered Rusty Pearl. I know that they have been hitting the B-Sides Security Conference and talking about this. And so I don't want to steal all your thunder today, so I'm going to ask my marketing producers to drop a link to the blog post about Rusty Pearl in the chat before I talk about it. But big shout out to Varonis Threat Labs. They uncovered a remote code execution vulnerability in Postgres using the Perl extensions, where it allowed attackers to execute arbitrary commands on database servers at the operating system level. So they found that Perl could be used to manipulate environmental variables via the environmental hash, bypassing built-in security modules. Now, it's a fairly primitive variable set, and Postgres would process these sessions. And so by combining this with privilege escalation inside the Rust compiler, you could inherit these manipulated environmental variables and execute arbitrary code like Rust GDB. And ultimately, though, what was really interesting in our testing, it was tested on like RWS. AWS has some runtime protections that actually blocked the exploit and prevented cross-customer or cross-database access, and also confirmed that RDS and Aurora weren't affected. But Postgres did release a security advisory back in November of 2024, and AWS followed up with a statement in May of this year recommending users upgrade to the latest versions and monitor logs for suspicious activity. Now, people that use standalone Postgres, especially those using Rust libraries, are advised to upgrade extensions and monitor for anomalies, as ultimately what this does is highlight the risk of trusted language extensions in your code environments and the importance of overall environmental variable hygiene.
Yeah, hats off. Reading the blog post on this, and yeah, so Frank dropped a link in there. Just the kind of inspiration to say, hey, can we modify the environment variables? Okay, how could we get something to run from there? Pretty clever.
Yeah, I thought so too. Now, what's going on with WinRAR? I mean, this is a blast from the past, is it not?
It is. And my favorite thing is this talked about alternate data streams, or this exploit involved alternate data streams, which if you guys have ever opened up a DOS prompt and then typed like notepad file name colon and then another file name, you can create a hidden file. And which is like you can't see in Windows Explorer. And I used to talk about this stuff all the time. It's pretty much just limited to NTFS file systems. But this was used in this WinRAR vulnerability. So what happened is the attackers modified the RAR file so that the files that you were extracting had alternate data streams like attached to the files that you were extracting. And these alternate data streams had path names in them with with relative like escape out, like dot dot backslash dot dot backslash, right? So it would basically, when you unpacked it, would take these files and then put them in like your system folder. And so basically somebody extracts one of these corrupted WinRAR files and then they can get malware that way because it's writing outside of the folder that you're trying to RAR into. That's a weird verb, or you're unRARing into. It's even weirder. So very clever. WinRAR patched this so that this exploit can't happen anymore. But I thought this was really interesting because it just brought me back to when we all used to talk about alternate data streams. At least
Yeah, and I still feel like if you attend any kind of class on computer forensics, you're still going to go through the how to check for alternate data streams and hiding and obfuscating data inside of alternate data streams. So it's not a total lost art. It's just kind of a legacy operating system thing.
Yeah.
Now, there isn't.
Speaking of legacy,
I was going to say, yeah. Is anybody out there today that's still using Exchange on-prem or Exchange hybrid mode? This is applicable to you.
Yeah.
On August 7th, CISA issued an emergency directive 2502 requiring federal agencies to apply mitigations by August 11th. So it's overdue if you haven't done it yet, due to this severe risk posed by CVE 2025 53786. And marketing host, if you wouldn't mind dropping that in the chat for people that like to copy paste it, which is a high severity flaw affecting on-prem Exchange servers and hybrid deployments. Essentially allows attackers to get administrative access and escalate privileges without leaving a trace, even impersonate users and access cloud resources as well. Essentially what they can do is exploit certificate credentials and request what are called S2S or service to service tokens from Microsoft's ACS or access control service, gaining access for up to 24 hours.
Hey, we had a question come in from Hunter. My understanding of and the question was, in the WinRAR vulnerability, was the payload executed? My understanding is it dropped it in places where it would be executed, like you could replace a DLL potentially, or put it in, a startup folder, that sort of thing. So it would be executed eventually.
Let's jump on to the danger zone in our last segment today. And what's going on with the Shade BIOS malware?
But BIOS compromise is one of the scariest things, I think, because it's just like, okay, you can't wipe the OS. You got to just kind of either figure out how to get the BIOS cleaned or throw out your computer. So there's a new vulnerability. It's a BIOS vulnerability called Shade BIOS, and it's different from some of the others that affect the UEFI, the Unified Extensible Firmware Interface, which I guess is kind of the more modern version of what we all used to think of as like the CMOS and the BIOS and things like that. And apparently the UEFI malware to date has to leverage the OS functions to do stuff like create files or send data out and things like that. And so in some ways it's not quite as scary like to detect, because you can still, it's hard to escape all the detections that we have in the OS. Now, Shade BIOS is different. It actually loads a separate OS in the BIOS with all its own functions that will run there, and it doesn't require the OS at all. Like, look, on OS, no OS. And how does it work? It normally what happens, by the way, is after an OS loads, kind of wipes all the BIOS functionality from memory, or it discards it. With Shade BIOS, it tricks the OS as it's loading to keep all this stuff around by changing the memory map. So it's basically misrepresenting the memory map to the OS, therefore hiding itself and allowing it to run. And because this is kind of like OS independent, it's hardware independent in a lot of ways. It really could kind of, it's a pretty advanced, scary thing that could affect a lot of computers. So far, I think this is just theory, but it's coming soon to a theater near you, I think.
Yeah, and speaking of what might be coming soon to a theater near you, I believe, and I'll get to the punchline again here in a second, but that Scattered Spider might be a verb now. So recent arrests of Scattered Spider members, Scattered Spider, also known as UNC 3944 in the UK, have, according to Google's Mandiant consulting arm, led to a noticeable drop in activity from the group. No new intrusions have been attributed directly to Scattered Spider since those arrests. And so now there's been a really good opportunity for people to study the tactics around Scattered Spider. However, despite that, like, other actors are mimicking Scattered Spider's social engineering techniques, like phishing and MFA fatigue or push bombing and SIM swapping. Scattered Spider is widely known for using ransomware variants like Dragon Force, the Ave Maria remote access Trojan, Raccoon Stealer, Vidar Stealer, Ratty Rat, and they also exfiltrate data using cloud services like Mega. They're widely known for impersonating employees to basically look like IT help desk employees, resetting people's passwords, hijacking MFA tokens. And for those of you that haven't been watching the last couple of episodes, we've talked about very large breaches of retailers and insurance companies, all tied back to Scattered Spider. And what it seems like, though, is that, like, following this playbook of impersonating IT help desk employees, social engineering users, gaining access and exfiltrating the compromising an identity and using that identity to access and exfiltrate information and then extort or ransom it from a company, is now like a verb. So you can get scattered spidered now that scattered
Yeah.
isn't an active threat actor anymore.
Yeah, if it looks like scattered spider, if it moves like scattered spider, quacks like scattered spider, I think people are just calling it scattered spider. And we know so much about their techniques now from all the advisories that I think a lot of the other attackers or actors are using those. And speaking of other attackers,
Yeah,
what's going
so
on
we got this
Shiny
huge,
Hunters?
shiny hunters. Been attacks on Salesforce. Now it is important to note that Salesforce isn't vulnerable to exploitation per se, as much as in the shared responsibility model, you as a consumer of Salesforce might have it set up in a way that might make it easier for an attacker to carry out this shiny hunters style attack, where via voice phishing, one of your employees or regular users is tricked into installing a malicious OAuth application. And the attacks include, high profile companies like Qantas and Allianz Life, LVMH, Adidas, Tiffany Korea, and more. And what attackers did was they tricked employees into authorizing these rogue apps that have data access. Now, there haven't been any public leaks of information yet. Mostly the attackers are extorting victims directly for ransomware payments. But in a lot of cases, there was some type of data loader component, David. And I know you were talking with me before the show today about that. Like, what's going on with this data loader?
Yeah, data loader is an admin utility used by Salesforce, and it's a valid kind of OAuth application. And how this attack works, and we actually have a diagram of it on the next slide, I think, is what you said. There's vishing, right? Kind of a voice attack, social engineering to somebody with a level of access to Salesforce. And the the attacker convinced the victim to install this OAuth app, including this connect code, which looked like data loader. Some of them had like my ticket portal, like was the name. They could rename the application or just have it look like the data loader app. But this data loader app basically gives the attacker then access to all the Salesforce data that user has, so that they would then exfiltrate it and hold it for ransom. And I've been talking to a lot of organizations that are interested in, well, wait a minute, tell me about these third-party apps, right? These OAuth apps, how do we detect them? Is anybody using them? Are they stale? Are they risky? And then how do we see what's happening through these apps as well? And then really, did they need all this access in the first place? So it's like you said, Matt, it's part of the shared responsibility model in Salesforce, where the responsibility on the end user is, it's pretty complex, or it's pretty complicated, right? There's a lot to get right and a lot that you can get wrong.
Yeah, 100%. And when we think about like what this means, we've got this kind of scattered spider, shiny hunters team up where it looks like the attacker groups are working together to target some of these global brands. As both groups are using, vishing and spoofed applications, domain impersonation. We saw attacks on retail and insurance sectors from April to June of this year. There's even shared domain registrar formats and the ways that the CNC domains are set up. And according to the dark web, the spider hunters claimed collaboration between the groups on Telegram. Now, like ultimately, like what do you need to do? You need to really focus on like the behavioral identification of threats, on like finding compromised identities, being able to respond to these types of things quickly, because ultimately, like both of these groups are known for stealing data and then extorting you to keep from posting that data online, and the tactics are similar. So making yourself more resilient to one is going to help you with the other.
Yeah, ShinyHunters, I think, has been known more for stealing data, and then Scattered Spider has been known for their phishing and their vishing. So it looks like a team up. They're actually there's talking about the team up on in online forums. Looks like the IOCs are similar. They're synchronizing targets. So it's kind of hard to tell one from the other, and it does look pretty dangerous. We did get a question in from
Yeah,
Bruno.
but could the installation of a deal be avoided if user had no
Yeah.
right? So
So
it's important to note on this one, Bruno, that this is about a Salesforce OAuth application. And that's not going to have something that's going to get installed on someone's computer. It's something that's going to get installed on top of their Salesforce. Now, you can avoid this if you prevent users from being able to install OAuth applications. And while you're doing that, you probably also want to make sure they can't view and export all records, and that they don't have API access either, because these are just other ways that like attackers could use a regular user account far more than they needed to in Salesforce. Also do things like multi-factor authentication.
Yeah, we've definitely been talking to a lot of people about these attacks, these different attacks and these different threat actors as well. So thanks so much, everybody, for joining in today.
Yeah, as always, the show is made possible by you, our audience, and we super appreciate you guys being here today and hope everybody has an awesome weekend. Hope to see you on the next episode, and always great to see you, David.
See you soon.